Beneath the bustling suburban sprawl of southeast London, hidden beneath layers of history and modern life, lies an extraordinary secret. It is a vast, echoing realm, carved by human hands over centuries, a subterranean labyrinth stretching for miles in a bewildering network of passages and chambers. This is Chislehurst Caves, a name that, for many, conjures images of ancient mystery, damp stone, and forgotten pathways. But during one of the darkest periods in British history, this remarkable underground world transformed from a mere geological curiosity into a beacon of hope, a life-saving sanctuary for thousands of Londoners caught in the brutal crucible of the Second World War. For millennia, the very ground beneath Chislehurst yielded its treasures. From the chalk and flint that formed its geological backbone, ancient peoples, and later industrial miners, tirelessly excavated, shaping a colossal void beneath the surface. It was a place of labor, of darkness and dust, of sweat and grit. Romans are believed to have harvested its flint for tools and construction. Later, during the medieval period and beyond, its chalk was extracted for agricultural lime and building materials. Each generation, unknowingly, added another passage, another chamber, expanding the intricate subterranean city beneath the rolling Kentish landscape, leaving behind a sprawling, silent monument to human endeavor. By the turn of the 20th century, the mining had largely ceased, and the caves, vast and cold, slowly receded from public consciousness, becoming a local curiosity, a place for intrepid explorers, or perhaps, for those seeking a momentary escape from the world above. But the world above was about to change irrevocably. As the 1930s drew to a close, a chilling shadow began to fall across Europe. The drumbeat of war grew louder, more insistent, culminating in the declaration of hostilities in September 1939. Britain braced itself, acutely aware of its island vulnerability, and perhaps nowhere more so than in its sprawling capital, London. The threat of aerial bombardment, a new and terrifying aspect of modern warfare, hung heavy in the air. Memories of the relatively limited air raids of the First World War paled in comparison to the destructive potential of the Luftwaffe's modern bomber fleets. What would happen when the bombs began to fall? Where would millions of ordinary citizens find refuge from the unprecedented onslaught from the skies? The summer of 1940 brought with it a suffocating tension. The Battle of Britain raged in the skies above, a desperate struggle for air superiority. But as autumn approached, and with the Royal Air Force defiantly holding its own, Hitler turned his attention to a different tactic, breaking the will of the British people through sustained terror from above. On September 7, 1940, the Blitz began. That Saturday evening, 348 German bombers, escorted by 617 fighters, descended upon London. The world watched, horrified, as the city burned. Docks, factories, and residential areas became infernos. The sky was filled with the deafening roar of engines, the whistle of falling bombs, the earth-shaking concussions, and the constant, unnerving wail of air raid sirens. Night after night, for 57 consecutive nights, and then intermittently for months, London endured an relentless pounding. Homes were obliterated, lives were shattered, and the familiar cityscape was scarred beyond recognition. Panic, though never completely taking hold, was a constant, gnawing presence. People desperately sought safety wherever they could find it. Public shelters were quickly overwhelmed. Tube stations, with their deep platforms and tunnels, became impromptu dormitories, offering a measure of protection, but even they had limitations and were often overcrowded and unhygienic. Garden shelters, Anderson shelters, and even sturdy kitchen tables offered scant comfort against the fury raining down from above. Londoners needed more. They needed true, substantial sanctuary, a place where concrete and earth could absorb the shockwaves, where stone could deflect the shrapnel, where they could truly feel safe, even for a few precious hours, from the ceaseless terror. And then, almost by chance, or perhaps by a stroke of extraordinary foresight, eyes turned to the forgotten world beneath Chislehurst. Here was a ready-made fortress, a vast, natural, and man-made shield. Its immense depth and network of chalk and flint tunnels offered precisely the kind of protection so desperately sought. The sheer scale was breathtaking. Estimates suggested it could comfortably accommodate thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands, far exceeding the capacity of most purpose-built shelters. But these were not comfortable, sterile environments. These were raw caves, damp, dark, and primordial. They lacked sanitation, lighting, and any semblance of the amenities required for human habitation, let alone for sustained living. Yet, the urgency of the situation was paramount. The need for refuge outweighed any discomfort. Slowly, tentatively at first, people began to explore this subterranean option. Local residents, aware of the caves, were among the first to venture down, bringing blankets, candles, and a desperate hope for security. The word spread like wildfire through the beleaguered streets of London. A place of safety, a refuge from the storm, existed beneath the earth in Chislehurst. And so, a remarkable transformation began. What started as a trickle soon became a torrent. Thousands upon thousands of Londoners, weary from sleepless nights and the constant threat of death, packed what little they could carry and made the journey to this unlikely sanctuary. But the story of Chislehurst Caves during the Blitz is far more than just a tale of refuge. It is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the extraordinary capacity for community in the face of unimaginable adversity. How did this ancient, forgotten labyrinth, carved by the hands of miners over countless generations, transform into one of Britain's largest, most extraordinary civilian air raid shelters? How did 15,000 strangers, fleeing the destruction above, forge an entire underground society, complete with its own hospital, chapel, cinema, and even a canteen, deep within the earth? This is the journey we embark on now, to uncover the hidden history of Chislehurst Caves, a vital chapter in the epic story of London's unwavering spirit during the Blitz. Beneath the tranquil suburban veneer of Chislehurst, deep within the earth's embrace, lies not a natural wonder, but a monumental testament to human endeavor stretching back countless millennia. Before it became a sanctuary from bombs, before it echoed with the fears and hopes of wartime Londoners, these caves were something else entirely. A vast, sprawling quarry, sculpted by the relentless will and muscle of our ancestors. To truly understand the crucible of resilience it became, we must first journey back to its very genesis, to the ancient dance between man and stone that began long before recorded history. The very foundation of Chislehurst Caves lies in the unique geological composition of this corner of southeast London. For millions of years, during the Cretaceous period, this region was submerged beneath a warm, shallow sea. Over eons, the skeletal remains of countless microscopic marine organisms, primarily coccolithophores, accumulated on the seabed, slowly compacting and transforming into the soft, white sedimentary rock we know as chalk. Interspersed within these vast chalk deposits, almost like dark veins running through the pale stone, are nodules of flint, a hard, dense form of silica. These flint deposits were crucial, forming when silica-rich waters filtered through the chalk, concentrating into pockets that later solidified. It was this dual bounty of readily accessible chalk and, more importantly, high-quality flint, that first drew human attention to this particular patch of land, setting in motion the centuries of excavation that would follow. Our story begins in the Neolithic period, many thousands of years ago, perhaps as early as 4000 BC. Imagine a time when survival hinged on the sharpest edge, the most effective tool. Flint was the indispensable material of the Stone Age. It could be knapped into razor-sharp blades, arrowheads, axes, and scrapers, the very instruments that allowed early humans to hunt, build, and process food. The surface flint, often weathered and brittle, was of limited use. The superior quality flint lay deeper, embedded within the chalk, protected from the elements. This understanding sparked the earliest, most arduous phase of the cave's creation: systematic flint mining. Early inhabitants, guided by an innate understanding of their environment, began to sink vertical shafts into the chalk, often several meters deep, following promising veins of flint. These were not mere scrapes in the ground. They were carefully engineered excavations, some narrow, just wide enough for a single individual to descend, others wider, suggesting the involvement of small teams. Using primitive yet effective tools, picks fashioned from deer antlers, shovels made from ox shoulder blades, and possibly even fire setting to weaken the rock, they painstakingly chipped away at the unyielding chalk. The air would have been thick with dust, the only illumination provided by flickering rushlights or animal fat lamps, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. It was a dark, dangerous, claustrophobic undertaking, driven by the fundamental need for survival and technological advancement. Once a flint seam was reached, horizontal galleries would radiate outwards from the bottom of these shafts, forming the very first embryonic tunnels of what would one day become a sprawling subterranean network. Each carefully extracted flint nodule represented hours, if not days, of backbreaking labor, a vital resource shaping the trajectory of early human civilization in this region. Fast forward through the Bronze and Iron Ages, periods during which the caves likely continued to be exploited for their flint, albeit perhaps with more refined tools. Then, with the arrival of the Romans in Britain in the 1st century AD, the scale and purpose of the excavation at Chislehurst underwent a dramatic transformation. The Romans, master builders and engineers, had an insatiable demand for materials to construct their roads, villas, forts, and towns. While flint remained valuable for certain implements and even early forms of masonry, it was the chalk itself that now became the primary target. Chalk was a remarkably versatile resource for the Romans. It was burned to produce lime, a crucial component of mortar for construction, binding bricks and stones into enduring structures. It was also used as a fertilizer, spread across agricultural fields to improve soil quality and boost crop yields, supporting their growing populations. The Romans brought with them superior iron tools, sturdy picks, chisels, and shovels, allowing for faster, more efficient extraction than ever before. Their methods were more systematic. Instead of winding, irregular passages, we start to see the development of more ordered, often rectilinear galleries, cut with a greater sense of purpose and engineering precision. The subterranean labyrinth began to grow exponentially, driven by the vast imperial demand. Entire chambers were hollowed out, pillars of chalk left strategically to support the ceiling, creating an increasingly complex web of passages beneath the Kentish landscape. The echoes of iron on stone, the rhythmic chipping, the shouts of supervisors, the creak of wooden carts laden with chalk, these would have filled the darkness, a constant symphony of industry and relentless progress. As Roman rule receded and Saxon kingdoms emerged, the caves continued their silent service to humanity. While evidence from this period is less abundant, it's highly probable that the Saxons, too, utilized the existing network. Chalk remained a valuable commodity for agricultural improvement and lime production for their emerging settlements. Some historians even theorize that parts of the caves might have offered occasional shelter or storage, though their primary purpose remained extraction. Over the subsequent medieval centuries, local communities likely maintained a smaller, more localized quarrying effort, further expanding or modifying existing sections as needed, the vastness below ground gradually becoming a familiar, if somewhat mysterious, feature of the landscape. Each generation, each passing century, added its own mark, its own layer of human effort to the subterranean tapestry. From the meticulous, desperate flint gathering of the Stone Age to the systematic, industrial-scale chalk quarrying of the Romans, the Chislehurst Caves slowly but surely took shape. They are not merely a collection of holes in the ground, they are a living archaeological record, a monument to human perseverance, ingenuity, and the relentless drive to harness natural resources. The very air within their cool, damp passages still seems to carry the faint echoes of countless blows struck, of dust rising, of ancient voices murmuring in the darkness. This immense, man-made labyrinth, forged over millennia by bare hands and primitive tools, would one day stand ready, a silent witness to history, destined to play an even more extraordinary role in a time of unprecedented crisis. From the ancient, almost primordial chiseling that first carved crude chambers beneath Chislehurst, the relentless drive to extract resources continued, evolving with the centuries but never truly ceasing for millennia. The Roman legions, the Saxons, the Normans, each left their mark, but it was in the crucible of Britain's industrial age, particularly through the burgeoning 18th and 19th centuries, that the Chislehurst network truly expanded into the vast, sprawling labyrinth we navigate today. This was an era of unprecedented growth and demand, and the unassuming hills of southeast London held beneath them the very foundations upon which much of that progress would be built. The primary geological treasures here were chalk and flint, fundamental building blocks for an expanding nation. Chalk, soft and yielding, was not just for marking, it was burned in kilns to produce lime, a crucial ingredient for mortar, plaster, and agricultural fertilizer, enriching the very soil that fed a growing population. Flint, by contrast, was hard, durable, and immensely versatile. Knapped into sharp flakes, it was used for tools and ignition, but more significantly, it was a prized construction material. The distinctive patterns of flintwork can still be seen in historic buildings and walls across the home counties, testament to its enduring strength and aesthetic appeal. The demand for these materials was insatiable, particularly as London, the grand imperial capital, swelled in size and ambition, its streets paved, its houses built, its infrastructure laid down with materials often pulled from the very earth of places like Chislehurst. Generations of workers descended into the cold, damp silence, their flickering candles the only defiance against the encroaching darkness. Armed with picks, shovels, and simple handcarts, they toiled in conditions that were harsh and unforgiving. The work was physically brutal, often dangerous, each swing of a pickaxe slowly but surely extending the subterranean frontier. Imagine the rhythmic clang of steel against rock, the muffled voices echoing through vast chambers, the strain of hauling heavy loads back to the surface. These were not just laborers. They were the unseen architects of an era, their sweat and toil literally foundational to the Victorian age's grand projects. They knew the labyrinth intimately, each passage, each chamber a familiar space in a world hidden from the sun. The techniques remained largely unchanged for centuries, a testament to their effectiveness but also to the slow pace of innovation in such isolated, underground environments. Pillars of chalk were left strategically to support the ceiling, creating the characteristic grid-like pattern that still impresses visitors today, a testament to a rudimentary but effective engineering. The output of these mines fed local brickworks, provided materials for the burgeoning railway network, and contributed to the thousands of homes that sprang up around London. Chislehurst wasn't just a quaint village, it was a vital artery in the industrial heartland, supplying the very sinews of progress. The sheer scale of the excavation tells a powerful story. Miles upon miles of tunnels, a testament to the collective effort of countless individuals over generations. The deeper they went, the more extensive the network became, a testament to the insatiable demand from the world above. However, the relentless extraction could not last forever. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the economic viability of the Chislehurst Caves began to wane. Resources became harder to reach, requiring deeper shafts and longer hauls, increasing costs. Newer, more efficient surface quarries emerged elsewhere, offering easier access to vast quantities of materials. Changing construction methods and the availability of alternative, often cheaper, building products also contributed to the decline. Slowly, inexorably, the mining operations became less profitable, until one day, the last cartload of chalk or flint was hauled to the surface, the last pickaxe laid down. The decision to cease operations wasn't a sudden, dramatic pronouncement, but rather a gradual surrender to changing economic realities. With the departure of the miners, a profound silence descended upon the caves. The rhythmic sounds of labor ceased, replaced only by the drip of water and the rustle of unseen creatures. Dust settled on the walls and floors, undisturbed for decades. The entrances, once bustling with activity, grew overgrown with vegetation, slowly blurring the lines between the engineered and the natural. The underground world, once a hive of human endeavor, became a sprawling, forgotten void. It was a subterranean ghost town, a network of silent arteries that once pulsed with life but were now cold, dark, and empty. The very people who lived above ground, in houses built perhaps from the materials extracted beneath their feet, largely forgot about the monumental scale of the world hidden just meters below. This period of abandonment stretched for decades, a long, quiet interlude where the caves remained largely undisturbed, a vast, dark secret beneath the suburban veneer. Left to their own devices, they became a curiosity for adventurous locals, a subject of local folklore, but little more. This silent slumber, however, was merely a prelude. The world above was hurtling towards another, far more devastating conflict, one that would once again call upon these forgotten depths, not for resources to build, but for sanctuary to preserve life. The industrial exploitation had created a monumental void, and in an unimaginable twist of fate, this vast, abandoned space would soon find a new, profound purpose, becoming an unlikely refuge in humanity's darkest hour. From the ancient, almost primordial chiseling that first carved crude chambers beneath Chislehurst, the relentless drive to extract resources had continued, evolving with the centuries, but never truly ceasing. The vast, sprawling labyrinth beneath the suburban landscape of southeast London, a testament to millennia of human endeavor, had witnessed the ebb and flow of empires, seen the dawn of the industrial age, and now, as the 1930s drew to a close, it stood poised on the precipice of its most extraordinary transformation yet. The rumblings that now shook the foundations of Europe were not geological, but geopolitical, a gathering storm threatening to engulf the continent, and with it, the very heart of Britain. The subterranean world of Chislehurst, for so long a place of industry and natural resource, was about to become something far more profound, a refuge, a sanctuary, a desperate answer to an unprecedented threat. The peace that followed the Great War, barely 2 decades prior, was proving to be a fragile illusion. Across Europe, new, aggressive ideologies had taken root, spearheaded by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany and Benito Mussolini's fascist Italy. The continent watched with growing alarm as Germany rearmed, annexed Austria in the Anschluss, and then turned its gaze towards the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, clinging to the hope of avoiding another catastrophic conflict, pursued a policy of appeasement, famously returning from Munich in September 1938 with a signed agreement and the declaration of peace for our time. For a brief, intoxicating moment, the nation breathed a collective sigh of relief, but for many, particularly those with a keener eye on the geopolitical chessboard, it was merely a stay of execution, a dangerous postponement of the inevitable. The sacrifice of Czechoslovakia, intended to satiate Hitler's ambition, only emboldened him further. By early 1939, the true extent of Hitler's insatiable territorial demands became undeniably clear. The complete occupation of Czechoslovakia shattered the last vestiges of appeasement, exposing it as a naive and ultimately failed strategy. The mood in Britain shifted dramatically, from a cautious optimism to a grim, resolute acceptance that war was, regrettably, unavoidable. The nation began to mobilize, not just its armed forces, but its entire civilian population. Rearmament efforts, which had been tentative and somewhat delayed, now accelerated with a desperate urgency. Factories churned out aircraft, tanks, and weaponry, while shipyards worked around the clock. The very fabric of society was subtly, yet irrevocably, altering as the British people braced themselves for a conflict unlike any they had ever known. The First World War had been a trench war. This, everyone feared, would be a war from the skies. The terrifying specter of aerial bombardment loomed large over Britain, particularly over its sprawling capital, London. Memories of Zeppelin raids during the First World War, though limited in scope and damage, had seared themselves into the national psyche. Now, with advancements in aviation technology, the destructive potential was exponentially greater. Experts and strategists painted chilling pictures of cities reduced to rubble, of chemical weapon attacks, and mass casualties. The prevailing wisdom, articulated by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin years earlier, was that the bomber will always get through. This stark declaration instilled a deep-seated fear that permeated every corner of daily life. The government anticipated that a single major raid on London could result in tens of thousands of casualties, pushing emergency services and hospitals to breaking point. The capital, with its dense population and vital infrastructure, was seen as an unavoidable primary target. In response to this existential threat, the British government initiated extensive air raid precautions, or ARP, campaigns. Civilians were instructed on how to respond to air raids, given advice on converting cellars into makeshift shelters, and encouraged to dig their own trenches in gardens. The ARP wardens, easily identifiable by their distinctive helmets, became a ubiquitous presence, organizing drills and distributing vital equipment. One of the most widespread preparations was the issuance of gas masks to every man, woman, and child across the country, a tangible and unnerving symbol of the coming conflict. Millions practiced donning their masks, a surreal and disturbing routine that underscored the severity of the threat. Blackout regulations were also introduced, requiring all lights to be extinguished or shielded after dark to prevent German bombers from pinpointing targets. Yet, despite these visible efforts, a gaping hole remained in Britain's defenses: a severe lack of adequate public shelters, particularly deep underground shelters, for the masses of Londoners. The existing tube stations, initially considered for shelter, were largely dismissed by authorities due to concerns about hygiene, panic, and the disruption to transport. The official policy encouraged people to stay in their own homes, or to use small, domestic shelters like the Anderson shelter, which offered protection against blast and falling debris, but little defense against a direct hit or sustained bombardment. For those in densely populated areas, or without gardens for an Anderson shelter, options were perilously limited. As the summer of 1939 gave way to autumn, London became a city held in a state of suspended animation. Beneath the veneer of daily life, the buses still ran, shops remained open, and theaters still staged their productions, lay a palpable tension, a collective anxiety that hummed beneath the surface. People went about their routines, but with an ear always cocked for news, a watchful eye on the sky. Children were evacuated from the city in large numbers, a heartbreaking but necessary measure that tore families apart, highlighting the stark reality of the imminent danger. Posters appeared everywhere, urging vigilance, advising on air raid procedures, and reinforcing the idea of a shared national effort. Conversations in pubs and homes inevitably turned to the escalating crisis, each headline from Europe adding another layer of dread. The fear was not just of death, but of the complete disruption of life, of a beloved city brought to its knees. The familiar skyline, so often a symbol of strength and progress, now felt terribly vulnerable, exposed to an unseen enemy lurking somewhere beyond the horizon. The final, agonizing diplomatic efforts proved futile. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, marking the definitive end of any hope for peace. 2 days later, on September 3, Prime Minister Chamberlain, in a solemn radio address, announced that Britain was at war with Germany. The declaration was followed, almost immediately, by the eerie wail of air raid sirens across London, a sound that would become synonymous with the war itself. It was a false alarm, a moment of acute terror that quickly subsided, but it served as a brutal, visceral awakening. The phony war then settled in, a strange period of inactivity on the Western Front, but the threat from the skies remained ever present. Every Londoner knew it was only a matter of time before the true test began, before the aerial onslaught they had so long dreaded would finally arrive. They needed shelters, deep and secure, places where an entire community could ride out the storm. And though few knew it yet, the year 1940 had been a crucible for Britain, a relentless series of tests following the fall of France and the miraculous evacuation from Dunkirk. An invasion of the British Isles seemed not just possible, but imminent. Yet, as the long summer months bled into autumn, the anticipated land invasion never materialized. Instead, a new, more insidious threat began to loom larger on the horizon, the relentless aerial assault that would become known as the Blitz. London, a sprawling metropolis that had largely been spared the direct ravages of war for centuries, was about to become the principal target. The prelude had been tense. For weeks, German bombers had targeted airfields and coastal defenses, attempting to clear the skies for Operation Celian, the planned invasion. But with the Luftwaffe failing to gain air superiority in the Battle of Britain, Hitler shifted tactics. The objective was no longer purely military. It was to break the morale of the British people, to cripple their industrial heartland, and to force a surrender through sheer terror. On September 7, 1940, a date forever etched into the memory of Londoners as Black Saturday, the full, horrifying reality of this new strategy descended upon the capital. That afternoon, under a deceptively clear late summer sky, the air raid sirens began to wail across London, a sound that would soon become a chilling nightly symphony. But this time, the drone of approaching aircraft was different. It was not a few reconnaissance planes, nor a small squadron on a hit-and-run mission. This was an armada. Over 300 German bombers, escorted by some 600 fighters, filled the air, a terrifying metallic swarm heading straight for the heart of the city. Their primary target was the vast network of docks stretching along the River Thames, the lifeblood of London, and a critical vulnerability. The attack, which began shortly after 4 p.m., was devastating in its scale and ferocity. Wave after wave of bombers unleashed their payloads onto the East End. Docklands, warehouses, factories, and the densely packed residential areas around them erupted into infernos. The sky, once blue, rapidly turned an ominous orange and black, illuminated by the flames of hundreds of raging fires. Columns of smoke billowed thousands of feet into the air, visible for miles around, a grim beacon announcing London's agony. The ground vibrated with the continuous concussions of high-explosive bombs, while the air crackled with the terrifying shriek of falling incendiaries, designed not to demolish but to ignite. For the civilians caught beneath this aerial onslaught, The initial moments were a mix of disbelief and sheer, unadulterated terror. Many had dismissed the earlier raids as minor skirmishes, expecting the war to be fought on distant battlefields. Now, it was directly above their homes, their streets, their lives. People scrambled for any cover they could find, the shallow trenches of their Anderson shelters in their gardens, the slightly sturdier protection of their basements, or simply under kitchen tables as glass shattered and plaster rained down around them. The sound was deafening, the roar of aircraft engines, the rhythmic thud of anti-aircraft guns firing back, the deafening explosions, and the distant, yet ever-present, crackle of burning buildings. As darkness fell, the destruction only intensified. The fires, now enormous and uncontrollable, painted the night sky a lurid red. London was literally on fire. The raid continued relentlessly for 8 agonizing hours, followed by smaller attacks throughout the night. By morning, the true scale of the horror became evident. Over 400 civilians had been killed, and more than 1,600 seriously injured. Thousands of homes had been destroyed or damaged, and vast swathes of the docks lay in smoking ruins. Public transport was in disarray, and countless businesses were obliterated. The psychological impact was profound. The initial shock gave way to a dawning, terrifying realization. This was not a single attack, but the beginning of a sustained campaign. Hitler's promise to wipe London from the map seemed to be unfolding before their very eyes. The routine of daily life vanished overnight. Work, school, shopping, everything now revolved around the omnipresent threat from the sky. The familiar rhythm of the city was replaced by a new, nocturnal cadence of sirens, bombs, and frantic searches for safety. The primitive shelters provided in the early stages of the war proved woefully inadequate for this new reality. Anderson shelters, dug into gardens, offered protection from shrapnel and collapsing debris, but little psychological comfort against the sheer force of a direct hit. Public shelters were often overcrowded, damp, and lacked basic amenities. The desperation for a truly safe haven grew with each passing night. As the bombs fell, families, often clutching what few possessions they could grab, would race through blacked-out streets, guided only by the distant glow of fires, searching for deeper, more robust sanctuary. Many flocked to the underground railway stations, which, while not designed as air raid shelters, offered the perceived security of being deep beneath the earth. These impromptu shelters quickly became a microcosm of London life, with thousands of people sleeping on platforms, transforming the stations into vast, communal dormitories. In those first bewildering weeks, the nightly terror became a grim routine. Londoners learned to distinguish the sounds of different bombs, to anticipate the brief lull before the next wave, and to live with a constant undercurrent of fear. Yet, amidst the destruction and the dread, something else began to emerge, a fierce determination, a shared sense of defiance. Neighbors helped neighbors, emergency services worked tirelessly, and strangers offered comfort to one another. The Blitz, intended to break London's spirit, inadvertently forged an unbreakable bond of community, resilience, and resourcefulness. For those seeking true sanctuary from the raging inferno above, the answer lay not in the shallow shelters of their homes, but deep beneath the very earth they walked upon, a solution many were yet to discover. As September 1940 bled into October, the night sky over London became a canvas of fire and fear, a horrifying spectacle repeated without mercy. The relentless drumbeat of German bombs, day after day, night after night, was not merely destroying buildings and infrastructure. It was eroding the very fabric of daily life, fracturing the collective psyche of a city under siege. Sleep became a luxury, peace a forgotten memory. The constant wail of air raid sirens, followed by the terrifying whistle of falling bombs and the earth-shaking concussions, created an unbearable atmosphere of dread. Every evening, as dusk began to paint the western sky, a profound anxiety settled over the capital, a chilling anticipation of the terror the darkness would bring. Londoners lived on a knife edge, their nerves frayed, their homes precarious. While the government had diligently distributed hundreds of thousands of corrugated iron Anderson shelters for back gardens and constructed numerous public surface shelters, their perceived efficacy against the kind of heavy, sustained bombing London was now enduring proved deeply unsettling, even psychologically inadequate. The shallow protection offered by an Anderson hut, often cold, damp, and vulnerable to anything more than a glancing blow, felt terrifyingly insufficient when bombs weighing hundreds of pounds plunged from the sky. Public surface shelters, often converted basements or purpose-built brick structures, offered some protection from blast and shrapnel, but they were vulnerable to direct hits and could become overcrowded, claustrophobic death traps under sustained assault. The constant vibrations of falling bombs, the screams of the injured, the suffocating fear. These conditions made even safe shelters psychological pressure cookers, offering little respite for exhausted minds. Amidst this harrowing reality, a powerful whisper began to circulate through the shattered streets and crowded tube stations, a rumor of a place, deep underground, impervious to the bombs. A vast, ancient labyrinth, miles beneath the earth, near the quiet suburban sprawl of Chislehurst, in southeast London. These were the Chislehurst Caves, long known locally as a curiosity, a place for mushroom farming, or an occasional tourist visit. But now, in the face of unprecedented aerial terror, their deep, cool embrace promised something far more vital: absolute, unshakable safety. A sanctuary not just from blast and shrapnel, but from the terrifying psychological toll of living under constant threat. The migration began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, a trickle of the most desperate and daring. But as the bombing intensified, so too did the exodus. Families, often with young children in tow, would make the perilous journey from their bomb-scarred homes, navigating the treacherous, blackout-darkened streets. They packed what little they could: a blanket, a thermos of weak tea, perhaps a few precious rationed biscuits, clutching gas masks and bundles of threadbare clothes. Every night, as dusk began to paint the western sky, signaling the imminent return of the Luftwaffe, a silent, determined procession would begin. From the shattered districts of the East End, from the docks along the Thames, from the densely populated areas of South London, people moved, driven by a primal instinct for survival that superseded all else. They came by any means possible. Overcrowded buses, rattling and swaying through the darkened streets, became impromptu ferries to perceived salvation. Trains, their windows often taped to prevent shattering, carried weary souls further south. Many walked, mile after exhausting mile, pushing prams laden not with babies but with bedding, or pulling improvised carts filled with what remained of their earthly possessions. The sheer determination was palpable, etched on every tired face. The route to Chislehurst, once an obscure path through suburban London, became a nightly pilgrimage. The local Chislehurst train station, a sleepy suburban stop, was soon overwhelmed, its platforms choked with arriving families. The roads leading to the caves themselves, unlit and winding, became rivers of humanity, all flowing towards the promise of safety, each step a desperate act of defiance against the terror raining from above. Upon arrival, the reality that greeted them was stark, a profound and immediate contrast to the imagined haven. The caves, sprawling and dark, were utterly unprepared for such an influx. There were no designated sleeping areas, no proper lighting beyond the reach of a few flickering candles, no sanitation facilities whatsoever. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, unwashed bodies, and fear. Thousands of people, many having never ventured underground before, found themselves huddled in vast, echoing caverns, their only comfort the knowledge that hundreds of feet of solid chalk lay between them and the destruction raging above. It was chaos, a sprawling, organic encampment born of pure, unadulterated necessity. This was not a planned government initiative, nor an officially sanctioned shelter in its earliest days. This was a spontaneous, grassroots movement of survival, born from desperation and fueled by rumor. Local authorities and emergency services, already stretched thin by the relentless bombing, were completely blindsided by the sheer scale of the human tide descending upon their quiet suburb. Yet, amidst the disarray, something remarkable began to emerge. People, driven by an inherent human need for order and community, started to carve out their own spaces. Families marked out pitches on the damp floor, delineating their territory with chalk, ropes, or whatever meager possessions they had. They shared candles, fragments of news, and the immense burden of their shared fear. The sheer resourcefulness of the Londoners, already tempered by months of war, shone through even in the darkest corners of the caves. The constant drip of water from the cavern ceiling, the distant coughs, the murmured conversations, the occasional cry of a child, these became the new, haunting soundtrack of the night, replacing the siren's wail and the thunder of bombs that echoed above ground. Children, initially bewildered by the subterranean world, soon adapted, finding adventure in the shadowy passages, their laughter a fragile counterpoint to the underlying tension. For many, the first nights were a profound shock, a jarring transition from the familiar comforts of home to the cold, damp embrace of the earth. But with each passing night, as the bombs continued to fall above, the caves cemented their reputation as an unbreachable sanctuary, a deep haven from the inferno. The migration to Chislehurst Caves was a powerful testament to the human instinct for self-preservation, a desperate gamble that, against all odds, paid off. It was a chaotic, unplanned, yet ultimately successful effort by ordinary people to seize control of their own fate. What began as a desperate scramble for mere survival would, in the coming weeks and months, evolve into something far more profound. An entire underground community, a subterranean city born from the crucible of the Blitz, where life, against the deafening roar of war above, would find a way not just to persist, but to build, to connect, and to thrive. The caves, once merely an ancient curiosity, had become the beating heart of an unexpected wartime saga, a deep sanctuary in a world turned upside down. As September 1940 bled into October, London became a city defined by the relentless, terrifying rhythm of the Blitz. The constant wail of air raid sirens, followed by the terrifying whistle and shudder of bombs, stripped away the illusion of safety, leaving a profound sense of vulnerability in its wake. Sleep became a luxury, peace a forgotten memory. In this crucible of fear, thousands instinctively sought refuge in the deep, ancient chalk mines of Chislehurst, their dark, cool depths offering a primitive, yet potent, promise of protection from the devastation raining down above. What began as a spontaneous, desperate migration of terrified citizens quickly ballooned into an unprecedented humanitarian challenge, transforming the raw, unadorned caves into an accidental, sprawling subterranean encampment. The sheer scale of this unofficial exodus was impossible to ignore. Every night, as dusk approached, streams of Londoners, clutching bundles, blankets, and often, their children, converged on the unassuming entrances to the caves. The numbers swelled from hundreds to thousands, until upwards of 10,000 souls were huddling nightly within the labyrinthine tunnels. Initially, this influx was entirely unmanaged, a chaotic testament to human instinct for survival. People simply claimed what space they could find, huddled together for warmth and comfort against the cold, damp stone. But chaos, however understandable, could not be sustained. The borough of Chislehurst and Sidcup, suddenly facing an unprecedented influx of displaced persons, quickly recognized that this vast, impromptu shelter required urgent, systematic intervention. The safety, sanitation, and indeed, the very survival of these thousands of individuals depended upon it. The challenge was monumental. These were not purpose-built shelters, but ancient workings, dark as pitch, damp, and freezing. The air hung heavy with the breath of thousands, and the lack of any proper facilities posed an immediate and grave health risk. The first and most pressing need was light. Imagine 10,000 people, packed into pitch darkness, illuminated only by the flickering glow of a few candles or a scarce, shared torch. It was not only disorienting and frightening, especially for children, but also inherently dangerous. The initial response was to bring in powerful diesel generators, their rhythmic thrumming becoming the new heartbeat of the caves. Miles of electrical cabling, hastily acquired and installed, began to snake through the tunnels, bringing the revolutionary blessing of electric light. Bare bulbs, strung at regular intervals, pushed back the oppressive gloom, transforming mere blackness into a dimly lit, yet navigable, reality. This simple act of illumination was perhaps the single most important step in making the caves not just a refuge, but a potentially habitable space. Following closely on the heels of light was the critical issue of sanitation. Without proper facilities, the sheer volume of people would quickly turn the caves into a breeding ground for disease. Ad hoc arrangements involving buckets and makeshift latrines were rapidly replaced by a more organized system. Hundreds of chemical toilets, supplied by the authorities, were strategically placed in designated areas, ensuring a modicum of dignity and preventing widespread contamination. Waste management teams were established, working tirelessly through the night and into the early hours, to empty and clean these facilities, a grim but vital task that underscored the depth of the commitment to public health. Fresh water was another urgent necessity. While the caves had natural springs, these were insufficient and often inaccessible. Pumps were installed, drawing water from underground sources and piping it to various distribution points, providing drinking water and, eventually, rudimentary washing facilities. The sheer logistical effort involved in maintaining these basic services, day in and day out, in a subterranean environment, was staggering. With light and sanitation addressed, the next step was to bring order to the sprawling sleeping arrangements. Initially, people simply slept wherever they could find a spot, often on the cold, hard floor. This was unsustainable and deeply uncomfortable. The authorities, in collaboration with volunteers and military personnel, began the painstaking process of demarcating specific sleeping areas. Thousands of bunk beds were procured, some newly manufactured, others requisitioned from barracks and institutions, and painstakingly assembled and installed throughout the accessible sections of the caves. These weren't luxurious, but they offered a structured, elevated space, providing a degree of personal territory and protection from the damp ground. A system of registration was implemented, allowing families to claim and retain their allocated space, fostering a sense of stability amidst the nightly routine of seeking shelter. Beyond the immediate human needs, the structural integrity and safety of the caves themselves became paramount. While the chalk mines were vast and relatively stable, the sheer number of occupants necessitated careful assessment. Teams of engineers and miners, many volunteers with intimate knowledge of the local geology, were brought in to inspect the tunnels. Pathways were cleared and widened, rudimentary signage was erected to help people navigate the confusing labyrinth, and emergency exits were clearly marked and made accessible. Air quality, too, was a concern. Thousands of bodies breathing in a confined space could lead to stale, oxygen-depleted air. Natural ventilation was augmented where possible, though the depth and layout of the caves presented ongoing challenges in this regard. The very act of transforming these raw workings into a safe haven was an unprecedented feat of civil engineering and logistical coordination. The rapid, official transformation was a testament to the combined efforts of local government, emergency services, military support, and an army of dedicated volunteers. A comprehensive management structure was swiftly put in place. Wardens were appointed for each section of the caves, responsible for maintaining order, assisting new arrivals, and addressing immediate concerns. Rules and regulations, though simple, were crucial for preventing chaos. Designated quiet hours, clear pathways to be kept free, and responsible use of facilities. This was not merely about providing shelter, it was about establishing a functioning, albeit temporary, society underground. Food and medical supplies began to arrive, distributed through central points, ensuring that the most vulnerable received sustenance and care. Doctors and nurses, often working in incredibly difficult conditions, set up makeshift first aid posts, treating everything from minor injuries to respiratory ailments exacerbated by the close confines. The journey from a spontaneous, chaotic refuge to an officially managed, structured sanctuary was fraught with immense challenges, yet it was achieved with remarkable speed and resourcefulness. The transition from pure survival instinct to organized resilience was swift and decisive. Chislehurst Caves, once merely a geological curiosity, became a powerful symbol of London's unwavering spirit during its darkest hour. It demonstrated the extraordinary capacity for adaptation, collective action. As September 1940 bled into October, London became a city defined by the relentless, terrifying rhythm of the Blitz. The constant wail of air raid sirens, followed by the terrifying whistle and shudder of bombs, stripped away the illusion of safety, leaving a profound sense of vulnerability in its wake. Sleep became a luxury, peace a forgotten memory. In this crucible of fear, thousands instinctively sought refuge in the deep, ancient chalk mines of Chislehurst, their dark, cool depths offering a promise of sanctuary from the inferno above. But what did that sanctuary truly entail? Once the initial relief of safety faded, a new challenge emerged. How to live, how to exist, day after day, week after week, in the vast, echoing darkness beneath the earth. For the Londoners pouring into Chislehurst Caves, life below the surface began with a fundamental quest: securing a pitch. This was their claim, their minuscule parcel of safety within the subterranean labyrinth. Every evening, as dusk approached and the sirens began their mournful wail, families would stream down into the tunnels, often carrying their entire night's provisions. Finding a spot wasn't a matter of mere convenience, It was a nightly ritual, a quiet battle for space. Early arrivals would claim their territory with chalk marks on the cave floor, sometimes leaving a blanket or a piece of rope to denote their designated area, a silent, yet firm, declaration of ownership. These pitches were rarely more than a few square feet, just enough space for a mattress or a few blankets laid directly on the damp earth, perhaps a small stool or a shared trunk. Privacy, an inherent expectation of life above ground, simply ceased to exist. Thousands of individuals, from infants to the elderly, slept side by side, their bodies arranged in rows, like silent, sheltering armies. The physical reality of life in the caves was stark. The air, while free from the smoke and dust of bombed-out London, was heavy with the smell of damp earth, stale clothing, and the lingering scent of thousands of human bodies. A constant low hum permeated the atmosphere. The murmur of hushed conversations, the restless shifting of bodies, the distant drip of water, and the occasional cough echoing through the vast chambers. Darkness was absolute, broken only by the dim glow of scattered electric lights, later installed by the council, or the flickering flame of a paraffin lamp brought by a family, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the mind. The temperature remained a constant, cool 52 degrees Fahrenheit, a welcome respite from summer heat but a chill that seeped into the bones during winter nights. The daily rhythm of this underground community was dictated by the war above. Each morning, as the all-clear siren sounded, signaling a temporary reprieve, the caves would slowly empty. Thousands would emerge, blinking into the gray dawn, to return to their jobs, their bombed homes, or the grim task of clearing rubble. Children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, would head to school. Then, as evening approached, the migration would reverse. The roads leading to Chislehurst would fill with people, bicycles and handcarts, all converging on the cave entrances, seeking the predictable safety of the depths once more. This subterranean commute became an ingrained part of wartime existence, a psychological boundary crossed twice daily, from the world of danger to the realm of temporary peace. Meeting basic needs for such a vast population presented monumental challenges. Sanitation was an immediate and pressing concern. Initially, primitive latrines were set up, but the sheer volume of people quickly overwhelmed them. The local authorities, grappling with an unprecedented situation, worked tirelessly to install more robust facilities, including flushing toilets, albeit basic ones, and hand-washing stations. Water, transported in from the surface, was a precious commodity, rationed for drinking and minimal hygiene. Food, at first brought in by individual families, soon saw the establishment of a centralized canteen. Here, for a small fee, weary shelterers could purchase a hot, simple meal, a bowl of soup, a stew, a cup of tea, providing not just sustenance, but also a vital sense of normalcy and community interaction. Beyond basic survival, the very fabric of a society began to form within the chalk passages. The casual proximity of thousands of strangers, initially a source of discomfort, gradually forged unexpected bonds. Friendships blossomed between pitch neighbors. Families shared food, stories, and the burden of fear. Children, despite the grim circumstances, found ways to play, their laughter echoing eerily through the tunnels, turning the vast spaces into their own unique playground. Informal leaders emerged, individuals who helped maintain order, resolve disputes, or simply offer a comforting word. Cave wardens, employed by the council, became crucial figures, ensuring safety, distributing information, and providing assistance. The authorities, recognizing that these caves had become a temporary underground city, began to establish essential services. A small hospital was set up, staffed by nurses and doctors, treating everything from common colds exacerbated by the damp air to delivering babies. Over a dozen children were born in the caves during the Blitz, a powerful symbol of life persisting amidst devastation. A non-denominational chapel provided spiritual solace, with regular services offering hymns and prayers that resonated through the ancient stone, bringing comfort to many. For entertainment, a makeshift cinema was established, showing newsreels and feature films, offering a precious hour or two of escapism from the relentless reality of war. Radios, set up in common areas, broadcasted BBC news and music, connecting the subterranean world with the one above, while wardens often read out headlines. Life below ground was a testament to extraordinary human resilience. The cramped conditions, the lack of privacy, the constant damp, and the ever-present knowledge of the war raging overhead could have broken spirits. Yet, against all odds, a vibrant, if unusual, community thrived. It was a place where shared hardship fostered deep empathy, where strangers became temporary family, and where the simple act of surviving together created an unbreakable bond. Chislehurst Caves, originally a place of extraction, had become a haven of human spirit, a unique chapter in Britain's wartime story, illustrating not just fear, but the incredible capacity for adaptation and hope when faced with unimaginable adversity. As September 1940 bled into October, London had become a city defined by the relentless, terrifying rhythm of the Blitz. The constant wail of air raid sirens, followed by the terrifying whistle and shudder of bombs, stripped away the illusion of safety, leaving a profound sense of vulnerability in its wake. Sleep became a luxury, peace a forgotten memory. In this crucible of fear, thousands instinctively sought refuge in the deep, ancient chalk mines of Chislehurst, their dark, cool depths offering an unprecedented shield from the terror above. But mere shelter was not enough. To sustain a burgeoning subterranean population of up to 15,000, these cold, damp tunnels had to transform. They had to become a living city, complete with the essential services that would not only sustain life but also nurture hope and community. Central to this remarkable transformation was the establishment of a fully functional underground hospital. Given the sheer number of people crammed into the caves, often in less than ideal sanitary conditions, and the ever-present threat of injury from the raids above, a medical facility was not merely a convenience, but an absolute necessity. Volunteer doctors and nurses, many working grueling shifts above ground and then descending into the chalky darkness, quickly established a meticulously organized space. Makeshift wards were created, rows of cots lined the excavated tunnels, and a dedicated treatment room was set up. Here, amid the flickering gaslight and the constant chill, everything from minor cuts and bruises sustained in the scramble to shelter, to more serious injuries, and the inevitable array of illnesses that spread rapidly in close quarters, was attended to. The medical staff faced immense challenges: limited supplies, the psychological strain of continuous emergency work, and the unique difficulties of operating in a damp, confined environment. Yet, their tireless efforts provided not just medical care, but a profound sense of security, a vital psychological anchor for those enduring unimaginable stress. Knowing that help was at hand, even deep beneath the earth, offered immeasurable comfort. Amidst the fear and the practicalities of survival, the human spirit also craved solace and meaning. This need was met by the surprisingly poignant establishment of an underground chapel. In a designated cavern, far removed from the constant movement and chatter, a simple altar was erected. Services were held regularly, often led by vicars who volunteered their time, descending nightly to offer spiritual guidance. The chapel became a quiet sanctuary, a place where people of all denominations could find a moment of peace, reflect on their circumstances, and draw strength from shared faith. Hymns echoed softly off the ancient chalk walls, a stark contrast to the distant rumble of bombs overhead. For many, it was a vital lifeline, a reminder of hope and humanity in a world that seemed determined to erase both. The chapel wasn't just about religious observance, it was about community, shared grief, and a collective yearning for a return to peace, providing a moral compass in a time of profound disorientation. Beyond the vital necessities of medical care and spiritual comfort, there was an equally pressing need for escapism and morale boosting. The constant anxiety of the Blitz took an immense toll, and a break from the grim reality was essential. This is where the underground cinema played its crucial role. Ingeniously set up in one of the larger caverns, complete with a projection screen, an old projector, and rows of repurposed benches, it became an unexpected beacon of entertainment. Every evening, after the last rays of sunlight faded from the world above and the sirens began their mournful wail, Londoners deep below ground could immerse themselves in the silver screen. Newsreels, often designed to bolster national spirit, shared the latest updates from the war fronts. But more importantly, feature films, comedies, musicals, Hollywood romances, offered a temporary reprieve. For a few precious hours, the fear of the bombs, the cold, the uncertainty, could be forgotten. Shared laughter and tears in the darkened cave fostered a unique sense of camaraderie, reminding everyone of the simple joys that endured, even in the darkest of times. It was a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit, finding light and laughter where only darkness was expected. No community, however temporary, could function without sustenance, and the Chislehurst Caves were no exception. The underground canteen quickly became a vibrant hub, a place of warmth, nourishment, and social interaction. Staffed by dedicated volunteers, often women who had spent their days contributing to the war effort above ground, the canteen operated on a strict rationing system, yet managed to provide warm, comforting meals and hot beverages. The smell of stew, tea, and baked goods wafted through the passages, a welcome contrast to the damp, earthy air. Despite the logistical challenges of transporting supplies and cooking for thousands, the canteen provided not just food for the body, but also a vital sense of normalcy and routine. It was a place where friendships were forged over a shared cuppa, where stories were exchanged, and where, for a brief while, the collective burden of the war felt a little lighter. It underscored the profound communal effort required, transforming a disused mine into a truly self-sufficient haven. The hospital, the chapel, the cinema, and the canteen were more than just facilities. They were the pillars of an extraordinary underground community. They represent the ingenuity, resilience, and unwavering solidarity of Londoners facing unprecedented terror. These makeshift services, forged in the depths of an ancient mine, demonstrate humanity's remarkable capacity not just to survive, but to thrive, to find comfort, hope, and even joy, even when the world above was quite literally falling apart. Chislehurst Caves stand as a powerful monument to the spirit of the Blitz, where collective effort and a defiant optimism turned a cold, dark refuge into a vibrant, living testament to human endurance.